Welcome to Books and Ideas Audio, a presentation of the Vancouver Writers Fest. The Vancouver Writers Fest connects people to exceptional books, ideas, and dialogue through year-round programming that ignites a passion for words and the world around us. I'm Leslie Hertig, Artistic Director, and I'm very happy to share this conversation featuring Desmond Cole, speaking with Barbara Chirinos. This event was recorded live on February 19th, 2020 at the Vancouver Public Library. Special thanks to our Insight event partner, the Vancouver Public Library. The Vancouver Writers Fest carries out its work, including this event you're about to listen to, on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. This event features award-winning journalist Desmond Cole speaking with Vancouver Arts curator and activist Barbara Chirinos about his new book, The Skin We're In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power.
Happy Black History Month. Yeah! I have to, move this mic up, but I have to tell you how full my heart is just seeing all of you, all of my siblings here, all of you, my siblings. Thank you so much for coming. This is a wonderful, wonderful event and an exceptional opportunity for me that I feel absolutely blessed. And also blessed that we have so many Black History Month events going on in Vancouver and the GVRD, right? Right on. I actually think that there was some tweaking of the universe somehow, some universal intervention when I received the phone call from Leslie Hertig, the artistic director of the Writers Festival, asking me if I would be interested in chatting with Desmond Cole on his new book. Universal intervention specifically because at the same time, I happened to have been reading The Stony Road by Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. The book is on the reconstruction of white supremacy, white supremacy, and the rise of Jim Crow. And I was also listening to the podcast 1619 by the New York Times reporter Nicole Howard Jones. So I was taking in quite a bit of information and really did not have all of that truth and pain are things that have to be taken into chunks for me. You know, I put the book down, pick it up, I learned quite a bit, had to put it back down, but felt empowered with the information that I had received from those books. And then the podcast, and then I received a phone call from Leslie, and I jumped at the chance. I said, can I get a copy of the book first? You know, like, yes, of course you can. And my copy came. The Skin We're In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power by Desmond Cole. If you don't mind, I'd like to share with you what I got out of the book before we actually start the conversation. This is, believe it or not, is his first book. And within his first book, he records in just 1 year the struggle of racism that was taking place in the eastern area of Canada. This book by Desmond Cole is a testament to his journalistic craft and skill. It's also a testament to his courage, his sense of justice, his heart, and his ferociousness. The Skin We're In records and reveals those who have suffered and those who are suffering racism today. It records and reaffirms through journalists like Desmond, if there are any others like him, I hope that there are, it does reaffirm the work of the social justice warriors who are continuing to battle racism here in Canada. It records the differences that they are making, albeit slow and painful and almost invisible to those that don't have a discerning eye. It records the dismantling of boundaries and barriers. It records what these warriors, it records that these warriors are not forgotten, that they will not be forgotten, that they are recognized through journalists like Desmond Cole. It is also revelatory. It reveals Canadian racism, and it also reveals that we should not be comparing racism in Canada to racism in the United States at all. Because out of everything, racism simply needs to be abolished. No comparison, because the US has more numbers, because they have more media, because they can record it more. Anti-Black racism is here in Canada. Just because we do not see as many stories as in other places does not mean it shouldn't be abolished, and also that it exists. One of the things that really impressed me about this book is that it confirms to those who have suffered and continue to suffer that we see you, we hear you, you don't have to, or put it this way, you're not going to get a question from us when you've told us about an experience. Are you sure? Do you think that maybe there was something that you possibly done to exaggerate this, or perhaps you read it a little wrong? No. You report anti-Black racism, and this is the book that says, we hear you, we recognize you, we know that this happens. This book also points out how important details from stories that we've read about anti-Black racism, particularly taking place in Ontario, how much the media has left out in terms of details. I've learned more about the social justice organizations that are back east, still fighting, found out more details about Black Lives Matter's Toronto, specifically how they worked with the Pride Parade, details that most of us here, particularly on the West Coast, were not getting from the press. There was a lot before the parade, there was a lot during the parade, there was a lot after the parade. But what we got in Western Canada, the rest of the world, and the rest of Canada was essentially about the uniformed police, and that was the issue, and that Black Lives Matter's Toronto just showed up and decided that this was something they were not going to do. This was completely revealing to me. This book is easy. Let me make sure I get this right, because this is very important. The book is complex. Although it is easy to read because Desmond's prose is clear, concise, well written, the book is not easy reading. Upon reading it, questions just kept popping up. Questions and pain arose. Yet at the same time, hope, advocacy, and pride from the work that organizations like Black Lives Matter's Toronto, Blackness Yes, Black Queer Youth, and Idle No More, what they are still doing, what they've done, and the fact that they are still here. This book also is reminiscent to me of 1619, and it's one of the reasons why I mentioned it, because Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, and allies are the Canadian citizens that constantly force Canada to live up to the Canadian ideal. It forces Canada and the systematic racism to look at itself and to say to these Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ plus and our allies that they are the citizens that are pushing the Canadian government systematic racism to say, what is the ideal in Canada? We're living up to and forcing you to essentially live up to the ideal and the brand that Canada is supposed to be. And these warriors are fighting for that all the time. Desmond Cole is a Canadian journalist and activist who lives in Toronto, hosts a weekly radio show on Sundays on News Talk 100. He's written for The Walrus, Toronto Star, Now Magazine, and a list of a number of publications. His activism has received national attention, specifically on the issues of police carding, racial discrimination, and the dismantling of systematic racism. I introduce to you Desmond Cole.
Hey. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you. It is like, it never gets old getting to celebrate this. So this is the 7th city that I've done this in now. And I have a lot of friends in the room this evening. A lot of people whose efforts, if not being directly described in this book, are inspired by things that you do and believe and fight for. So thank you for being here to share in this night with me. Thank you to every Black person in this room for existing. I'm going to read from a couple of chapters in this book right now. I would like to share with you readings from 2 chapters that are entitled The Unsettling, which is the July chapter of the book, and Honored Guests, which is the June chapter of the book. Every chapter of this book represents 1 month of the year 2017, and I chronicled this month by month, taking a different story or idea for every month, trying to give it a place in 2017, but also a historical context. Because of what's happening in this country today, right now, I thought I should read from The Unsettling, because that is the chapter about Idle No More's interventions in Canada 150. After that, I would like to read you a passage from Honored Guests, which in the June chapter refers to Black Lives Matter Toronto being the honored guests of the 2016 Pride Parade, until they decided to shut it down, and then they weren't so honored anymore. I mean, not by me, but I still fuck with them. And please forgive me, everybody, because it turns out that being on tour is really exhausting, being on different time zones and stuff. So I'm feeling it today. I'm feeling it, but I'm feeling all of you as well, and I'm so happy that you're here. This is from The Unsettling, July. In its call to action on July 1st, 2017, Idle No More quoted the late beloved activist and author of Unsettling Canada, Arthur Manuel, of the Secwepemc Nation. Quote, "I do not wish to celebrate Canada stealing our land. That is what Canadians will be celebrating on July 1st, the theft of land. The theft of 99.8% of our land, leaving us on reserves that make up only 0.1% of the territories given to us by the Creator. End of quote. I Don't Know More organizers said its unsettling 150 Day of Action would remind Canadians that the framework of government that we celebrate, quote, illegally confiscated our lands, territories, and resources, spawned the Post-Confederation Indian Act, and attempted to write Indigenous jurisdiction and Indigenous peoples out of existence, end of quote. In the late hours of June 28, 2017, dozens of Anishinaabe land and water defenders, some from Northern Ontario and Manitoba, and several of their supporters, appeared on the edge of Parliament Hill. The hill was meant to be the main stage for the Canada Birthday celebrations, but these demonstrators had come to partake in a different ceremony, the erecting of a teepee. Many of the demonstrators came carrying the long wooden poles for the teepee frame, which they intended to set up on the lawn of Parliament Hill. At first, the demonstrators didn't make it inside the gates. They were met by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers who blocked their path. Can we just pause for a second and appreciate what it means that the Mounties were at Parliament Hill to stop Indigenous people and their allies from putting up a teepee? Damn. Before there was an RCMP in Canada, there was the Northwestern Mounted Police. When I was a kid, one of the Heritage Minutes that used to play on television featured the Northwestern Mounted Police. Y'all remember this? In the short feature, a red-coated officer stares down a gun-toting American gold prospector who is trying to bring gambling gear and weapons into Canada. It was quality propaganda. No one ever bothered to teach me on TV or at school that the Northwestern Mounted Police was one of Canada's first official means of controlling and surveilling Indigenous peoples. The upstanding Mountie is one of Canada's favorite tropes about itself, one that conceals its oppression of Indigenous peoples. The demonstrators arrived with teepee poles at the gates of Parliament Hill. The RCMP arrested at least 9 demonstrators and issued them notices of trespass. Under those orders, the police said the demonstrators could not return to the Hill for 6 months or would face arrest if they did. But the RCMP could not stop the demonstrators who held their ground in the rain, the teepee poles resting on tired arms, backs, and shoulders until police finally gave way and the ceremony continued. The demonstrators set up their teepee just inside the eastern gate of Parliament Hill. That's as far as the police would let them go. They drummed and sang as they erected the teepee. They emphasized that their action was a ceremony and an opportunity to educate the public about their struggle. In the words of Elizabeth Cook of the Boating Water Protectors, who had traveled about 800 kilometers from Sault Ste. Marie to Ottawa, quote, "This is not a protest, and we are here to pray for solutions. We are here in a peaceful state, and we are welcoming everybody to come and join us and learn from each other." The water and land protectors negotiated with police to move the teepee away from the gates and closer to center block. The control of their movements and the gates between them and the lawn of Parliament Hill mirrored much larger issues. Several distinct Algonquin nations have an unsettled land claim involving 8.8 million acres of the Ottawa watershed, including all of the land that Parliament Hill occupies. The government regularly begins its own proceedings by acknowledging its place on unceded Algonquin territory. It isn't abstract to say that the Algonquin and the broader Anishinaabe still cannot live and conduct ceremonies on their traditional territory without government intervention, arrests, and punishments. That was July, and I'd now like to read you from June, called Honored Group, about Black Lives Matter Toronto. Black Lives Matter Toronto was different from most black activism I'd seen. Its organizing crew seemed to consist almost entirely of black women and black queer and trans people whose voices, the organizers regularly emphasized, have consistently been marginalized within black decision-making and community organizing. The group's members all referred to themselves as co-founders. Many of the young organizers I followed in those early months, including Alexandria Williams, Yusra Khogali, Sandy Hudson, Pascal DeVerlis, and Rodney DeVerlis, were students at local universities and were actively engaged in struggles on campus for free nutrition, the creation or expansion of Black and African studies, and better accessibility standards and services. As I attended every BLMTO event that I could, I noticed the organizers often hired American Sign Language interpreters for deaf attendees. BLMTO advocated for black sex workers, for black people who didn't speak English, for black Muslim people. The media rarely explored the depth of experience and advocacy among these black organizers. Instead, mainstream media coverage focused on the unlikelihood that BLMTO would secure the approval of white people with its radical politics and unapologetic approach. The 2016 Pride disruption made headlines around the world, but the media's response to a critical BLMTO action only a couple of months earlier had been a relative shrug. At the end of March, the Special Investigations Unit in Ontario had announced it would not charge the officer who had shot and killed Andrew Loku. We now know that officer is Andrew Doyle, but the SIU's practice is to withhold the names of officers who are not charged with a crime. Doyle's identity became public during a 2017 coroner's inquest into Andrew Loku's death. In response to this and other denigrations of black life, BLMTO staged a demonstration which started at Toronto City Hall and then moved to police headquarters. The group demonstrated continuously for 15 nights and 16 days, enduring attacks from the police while holding open a space for black power and defiance it called Tent City. The mainstream media was at Tent City when Toronto police attacked demonstrators and their allies on their first full day of protest, kicking and shoving them and using a chemical goop to permanently douse the fire they'd started inside of a barrel to keep warm. And the media was there more than 2 weeks later on the last day, the day that the demo ended, as organizers confronted Premier Kathleen Wynne on the grounds of the legislature, and organizer Yusra Khogali pressed her to utter the words anti-black racism in relation to the struggle. Otherwise, the media was absent, as if other than our direct conflict with the state, there was nothing newsworthy in the sustained gathering of black people night and day protesting against police brutality. And then BLMTO stopped the Pride Parade. Thank you. If I could just do one more thing in relation to what Barbara was saying about how extensive these demands were that BLMTO made upon stopping that parade, I would simply like to read them to you. I just want to read you the 9 demands that were rolled out on a piece of paper, probably bigger than this scroll, because BLMTO knows that the media doesn't want to do their job and tried to help them out. But they still only talked about one of those 9 demands, even though they were all on a huge sheet of paper. So I just like to read them to you before I sit down. Number 1, these are all demands for Pride Toronto, the organization. Number 1, commit to black queer youth's continued space, including stages and tents, funding, and logistical support. Number 2, self-determination for all community spaces, allowing community full control over hiring, content, and structure of local stages. Number 3, full and adequate funding for community stages, including logistical, technical, and personnel support. Number 4, double funding for Blockorama. Number 5, reinstate and make a commitment to increase community stages and spaces, including the reinstatement of the South Asian stage. Number 6, a commitment to increase representation amongst Pride Toronto staffing and hiring, prioritizing Black trans women, Black queer people, Indigenous folk, and other groups and others from vulnerable communities. Number 7, a commitment to more Black, deaf, and hearing ASL interpreters for the festival. Number 8, removal of police floats in the Pride marches and parades. Number 9, a public commitment to a town hall to ensure that the 8 demands that I just read to you actually got fulfilled. It's a really, really simple thing for the media to take a list like that was written down and presented to all of them and handed out on hundreds of leaflets in that parade during the demonstration. They could have told everybody and they didn't choose to do it, and that's why I had to write this book in part. So that's part of the education process that we have to do because the media refuses to do its job. But thank you for your attention. I appreciate everybody. This is just like...
Hello. Am I on? I know my people will tell me. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Desmond.
Thank you.
And thanks for bringing up that particular point as well, because I was, as I'd mentioned earlier, completely blown away that the list was as extensive as it was. And as you mentioned, it was already written out. All that needed to be done was essentially report what the news was. How is the media now in Ontario? How are they responding to your book? Is there any response yet at all?
Yeah. Can people hear okay? Is everybody okay? Yeah. Wonderful. In general, this book is being well received. I experienced something that probably is common to a lot of people in this room, which is that I've been doing this work for 10 years now, and white people are really surprised that I'm good at my job.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, been there.
And the fact of the matter is that, like, I started off doing City Hall coverage in Toronto and going to committee meetings and going to community meetings and learning about process at City Hall. I covered the early days of the Rob Ford. I covered the whole Rob Ford administration, really, when he was mayor of the city of Toronto. I learned a lot of stuff, and it helped me. You know, I learned a lot of stuff as a community worker before I ever did journalism that helped me understand a lot of things as well. But we as people in journalism in general, as a collective, are extremely lazy. And we don't read, shocker, in our industry, a little ironic, but we don't. And especially white media doesn't read the thoughts and expressions and work of Black people. And so they are always surprised. I interviewed with somebody this year for this book who I've interviewed with before. And it's like every time I'm back in studio, he's like, oh, wow, gee, Desmond, wow, oh. Good work, buddy. Like, but what's happening at the same time is that people are like, you know, keep that guy the fuck out of our shop. Don't give him a job here. Don't give him a platform, a consistent platform around any of us. He's going to talk his Black stuff, and nobody really wants too much of that. Nice little doses. And so then Desmond goes away. I wrote this book it was not like I was really being quiet. It's very hard for me to be quiet. I'm not that kind of person. And but I was relatively quiet writing this book, and I don't know what people thought I was doing. But when I came back out and said, okay, the book is ready, and started doing all this, it's like surprised again. When, you know, I've been doing the work, and I've been documenting other people doing the work. So I think that I want to say something to everybody here. I found out a couple of hours ago something. I was thinking about reading to you from the April chapter, because the April chapter is about two things. It's about carding, which is also, of course, a very relevant topic in Vancouver right now, as it always is. But also, it's about my own personal struggle at the Toronto Star, because how I wanted to write about issues for that newspaper, how I was hired there after a personal essay that I wrote about carding, and then I was disciplined for a personal demonstration about carding, about how white journalists at the Toronto Star have written about carding for 20 years and never been told that it was too much. But I wrote 2 or 3 articles and was told that it was too much. That has hurt me, and as you can see, I still take it very personally. But this evening, I found out that this past week, this book was the #1 nonfiction book in this country. And I'm extremely, extremely proud to be able to say that. I hoped that it would happen, and I'm proud of it because I've never had a full-time job in the Canadian media landscape in 10 years. And I still did that. And I think it's really important to persevere with the things that you feel are important when people don't necessarily validate you, don't give you the space.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I'm not surprised, actually, after reading the book. While I was taking notes in the book, I started writing down the names of the people that have been killed, of the people that have been brutalized, of the people that have been, in a way, not teased is a bad word, but provoked, like the families of the Abdi family. And I took it really quite personally and went through a range of emotions as I was reading. At first, I got a little sick. Then I got really sad. And then I got really pissed off. And I bring that up because there was a radio interview that you had done where the journalist, radio host, whoever he was, just kept referring to the people as cases and talking about numbers. And I became enraged because these are real people and a number of families that have been impacted. Has that sort of interview been happening in other places, or is that the only interview where you'll have a journalist who essentially does not see the people within the book?
This is going to sound maybe bad, but I want to be honest. I sometimes don't even notice anymore.
I hear that.
Like, I went into an interview recently where I was trying to talk about police abolition, which I hope we can talk a little bit about this evening. Mm-hmm. And I've had this happen a couple of times on this tour. I mentioned police abolition, and the interviewer was just like, well, that's not going to happen. And I'm like, oh, shall I interview you now and ask you why? Would you like to answer some questions? But people can so easily imagine that black people will continue to suffer before they could imagine us being free.
Yes.
Right?
That's true.
And sometimes I just have these emotional responses in the middle of interviews where I'm just like, I'm just going to try and stay focused here, because it's like you're fighting the emotion of what's being said to you while you're trying to answer the question. Mm-hmm. And it's like really difficult and frustrating. I think that the reason I needed to write this book, among other things, was that mentality that treats these as cases also makes them detached.
Yes.
Like there's no coherency. The report that came out, yesterday in this city? Yeah. About police carding in Vancouver. Police carding that so intentionally targets our communities and Indigenous communities. And the report's like, inconclusive evidence. Who knows? Who the fuck knows? And I'm like, it's just so exhausting because you can't take all of these so-called cases and put them together to make a coherent analysis of what's going on if you're the mainstream media in this country. You have to use remember everybody Men in Black when they have the flashy thing that takes your memory? Mm. So that's what the media does every single day when they read about black people. They're just like, shh, what was that again? What? Oh, a black person? Oh. And they call themselves black? Oh, weird. And like white people don't want to be called white, so they're always even just obsessed with the fact that we're naming our blackness in these crimes. But it's so frustrating that I needed to have a space where I don't have to start with the whole, was it racism or a case of mistaken identity tonight at 11? Like, I don't need to start from that point. I know what the reality is. My community knows. And I get to start from that point rather than saying, like, here's an interesting case that you should think about, which is what we're tending to do all of the time in the mainstream.
Well, thank you for listing all of the names, because it's a reminder that these are actually people and we're living and breathing human beings, which a number of Caucasians don't want to think that we're human, essentially, and does explain a lot of their behavior in terms of the way that they act towards us.
I will say, just because you brought this up, that there is a name in this book, that there are probably others too, but I'm thinking of one in particular, and I want to right a wrong, if I could really briefly. There's a fellow that I interviewed about a very important contribution that he made to a story in this book. One of the stories in this book is about DeFonte Miller, who was 19 years old, or over 3 years ago, when he was attacked. He was attacked by an off-duty police officer named Michael Theriault and his brother Christian Theriault. Michael is he's a Toronto police officer. He's still somehow with the force while he faces the criminal charges that he got for assaulting DeFonte. And one of the central features in the Ontario media, especially of that story, was a video. And I talk about this video in the book. It's not a video of the attack. There was no video of that. But it's a video of this police officer who is alleged to have done it. I say alleged. He did it, but, So this video kept playing on all the news. And it's a video of this police officer kind of in uniform, walking up to the person who's filming him and clearly having a conversation with them. Every time that this video would be playing, it would be in the background of the news story, and you would not hear the sound or usually have any context of where this video came from or what it was showing. It turns out that what this video was showing was the same police officer, Michael Theriault, accosting a black person like 2 years earlier in a parking lot. And the reason that he was accosting that black person was because that black person caught him profiling other people in the parking lot and whipped out his camera and said, I know what you're doing. You're harassing these people. Leave them alone. So even before anybody knew about the attack on DeFonte Miller, here's a person who had documented this police officer's behavior and thought, this is strange. This is unacceptable. I have to say something about this. I didn't use his name in the book because I wanted to protect him. Because his act of bravery to film this man and put his face out to the world exposed him to a certain amount of danger. And even though you can find his name by doing research, I thought it would be better for him if I didn't put his name in the book. He contacted me and said, I would have wanted you to. he's had his own experiences with the police, and he thought it would have been important. When the book gets put into paperback, I'm going to name Joseph Briggs as the person who did that. I want to name him in front of everybody tonight, and I want to say, like, the names of people really do matter.
Yes.
When they're comfortable enough to speak out, right? It's a huge request to ask somebody to identify themselves in these kinds of circumstances, and I recognize that. But Joseph contacted me and said, no, I want my name out there, and so I honor him.
Excellent. And one would think that when Toronto actually gained a black police chief, that...
Oh, keep going. I'm so sorry.
I mean, I know. There's so much to be said. When I arrived at that portion of your book and thought, yeah, this is great. Police, Saunders, is that his name?
Saunders, yes, that's right.
That he's going to understand. He'll be able to solve some things or put some measures into place so that carding is not as prevalent as it is. Perhaps come up with an agency to collect some data so that now they can no longer say, well, we don't have anybody to do that. That's
Right.
why we don't collect it. Plus, the police don't arrest anyone based on race. So please, will you mention some things about Police Chief Saunders in terms of, has anything changed since the book?
Oh, God, the book's been out for like 5 minutes, so no,
No,
like,
well, I
definitely
mean-
not.
Well, but your chronicles are 2017.
Yeah, so, I said since the time that
Yes.
the book is set in.
Yes.
So let me say a few things about, like, this topic. First of all, Mark Saunders is not alone. Ottawa has a black police chief now. His name is Peter Slowly. Winnipeg had a black police chief several years ago. Clunas, I believe, was his name. This isn't new, but it's like a really popular tactic now to try and give us all some hope.
Right.
I have various feelings about this, one of which is that Mark Saunders' politics should have been apparent to everybody before he ever opened his mouth as the police chief. He was a homicide detective for 33 years, guys. He's married to the game. And I don't know why people expected him to betray the rank and file whose trust he needed to gain to become chief. The rank and file that is mostly white men. Is it safe for a black man to try and get to the top of that paramilitary force and then say we're going to stop racism? Is that even safe? Is it fair to ask Mark Saunders to take on that risk? No.
No, of course not.
Yo, you take a knee in football and they want to take your family out. Like, they want Colin Kaepernick dead. And he and his family are going to have to live with death threats for the rest of their lives because he took a knee on a football pitch. So you expect Mark Saunders, not you, but people expected Mark Saunders to go in there and do something. But it's like, that's not how you rise up the ranks of a paramilitary organization. You do what is expected of you. You show loyalty. And then when you get the job, there's not going to be any surprises. In that sense, I don't expect anything of these folks, and it's not their fault. They are personally responsible for the betrayals towards our community that include Mark Saunders taking office the very first day he was chief and using the term collateral damage to talk about our communities and carding. He said collateral damage as it relates to the fallout from us being racially profiled. So he's responsible for that, and I will never forgive him for saying that. I will also never forgive Mark Saunders. Well, I won't get into it. There's some gory stuff that he's done and said in the past. But all black people who are part of institutions, I'm not looking at them filling the position as being the accomplishment. You getting there is not the accomplishment. Nobody talks about the second black anything.
True.
So they say the first black to kind of like stun us into some kind of excitement that this is going to be different this time, and then they just move it along. And that's what Saunders has done. So since 2017, Mark Saunders has really just become embittered in the job. He's become resentful of any black people who try to challenge him. And he's doing a lot more hiding these days than leadership because he can't handle the pressure. And quite frankly, I hope he resigns in disgrace because he's not helping any of us by being there. It is possible for black people in institutions to make change and to push for something better. But their presence alone doesn't do it for me. They actually have to commit to an agenda that will change things. And that's not really an individual's responsibility.
You're absolutely correct. I think we're getting to the point where we're close to questions.
Sure.
And I'd like to emphasize the importance of hearing black voices tonight. So for any of our allies that are here and you do have burning questions, if you can please give black people the opportunity to ask questions first, and hopefully we'll be able to get as many questions in as possible. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Only that this is a very emotional book. These are a very emotional set of topics that we're talking about. And I hope that you ask questions about what's in your heart. I know many of you haven't had a chance to read the book yet, and that's totally, totally okay. Please buy the book. I want to stay at number 1 for more than 1 week. But beyond that, yeah, if this is bringing up feelings for you, I hope that that's what you discuss. The questions about like my writing process, which is not that interesting, but there's been like a lot of articles that cover that. Like that's already out there. I will not tell you about my self-care regimen, so please do not ask me about that. So all those questions that you're like, this is what you ask a writer, right? Like, don't do that tonight. That's all I'm saying. Like, speak from the heart.
Okay, I think we got the drill. And I see a question in the back, and please. I'm not sure if did you hear all of that?
I honestly didn't hear all of that.
Do
but
you mind coming?
It was a comment, so
No.
I think.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes. The back. Here.
I think we need to get people a microphone.
Yeah. Because, or...
The question is about the relationship between Black and Indigenous communities. You said in Toronto, but more broadly than that as well. I live in Toronto, so it's easier for me to speak to that. I did 13 chapters in this book. So every chapter I said is a month of the year 2017, but there are 13 months in my year because January of 2018, some really unbelievable stuff happened to a young man named Abdul Abdi. People ask me what my favorite chapter is in the book, and I usually say I don't have one. But in this moment sitting here, I feel like this was really, truly my favorite chapter because it was about a person and his family who overcame a set of circumstances that really were almost impossible to overcome in this country, and that most people don't. So I won't tell you the whole story, but the point is that January of 2018 ended up being the final chapter, and it ended in a January and it began in a January to show the cycle, to show that just because the year ends doesn't mean the struggle ends. The work is not finished, and so the book kind of leaves that open to say we start a new year, but the same struggle keeps going. The middle chapter of the book is The Unsettling, which I read from, about Indigenous struggle. And I did that even in a book about Blackness, because I can't actually be free, and we as Black people cannot be free until Indigenous people are. And I've had the great benefit of having teachers back home where I'm from, where there's a lot of Anishinaabe people primarily, but not just, but who have taught me about covenants between Indigenous people in my part of Canada and settlers, about treaties and the fact that these treaties have not necessarily always been honored. My parents come from Sierra Leone in West Africa. My parents came from one colonized British territory to another colonized British territory called Canada. So this is not our land. And I'm like, how can we really fight back if we don't acknowledge and understand the colonial struggle and honor the colonial struggle of those who are here in the same way that I would want people to honor my parents' colonial struggle if they were in Sierra Leone? So that's why I included this in the book. It occurs to me that because of systemic racism and white supremacy, and because of the history of colonialism and the enslavement of both Black and Indigenous peoples in Canada by the British and the French, that today, Indigenous people are the most likely young people to be taken from their parents, but Black people are coming very close behind now, especially in Ontario. And that means that there are a lot of Black kids in group homes and foster care homes tonight sleeping with Indigenous children in the same spaces as them. It means that in our jails tonight, there are a lot of Black people sleeping next to Indigenous people in jail. The systems are having these impacts that are putting us into these same spaces, including into poorer neighborhoods across Canada. And while I don't believe that it is our responsibility or our duty as Black and Indigenous people, respectively or collectively, to like overthrow the majority white state, and make all of its crimes amended. I do think we have those opportunities in close proximity to one of each other to listen and to share and to like learn from one another. I saw that in Tent City, where one of the big regrets that I have in this book is that I didn't even mention a line about this in this book, but when BLMTO held it down in front of the police headquarters for 15 days and 16 nights, like I mentioned, there were Indigenous land demonstrators with them every single minute of that demonstration. They never left the camp. They never left. And then right after Tent City was over, Indigenous people started occupying INAC buildings across Canada, and Black people went there and demonstrated with them too. So there are a lot of opportunities, I guess, for that kind of exchange that I do see. I also want to honor the fact every time I'm asked about this, like, I didn't get into this complexity in the book too much either, but there are people who are both Black and Indigenous in Canada, and I don't want them to be erased in this conversation. So you can be both. You can be and plus more, and you can identify in many different ways. So it's a rich history that comes from a really complex colonial past.
Any other questions? Athena? Right here, then there.
I'm going to give you the mic because we're like,
yes.
You know?
Sorry, excuse me. You said earlier that you were hoping to have, this might be a big question, you were hoping to talk a little bit about prison abolition. Police abolition. Police abolition. Yeah. What I was wondering was, with all that you've seen, all the work that you've been part of, all that you've reported on, how, where, what, why do you keep, how do you keep that vision alive?
Thank you for that wonderful question. It's kind of that one feeds into the other. It's because I have documented so much of people in systems fighting so hard and being thwarted that I have become an abolitionist. Not just about the police. The child welfare system has to go. The prison system has to go. When we say these things, though, it strikes terror and fear in the hearts of the white majority in this country, which is awesome. I'm just trying to have a little fun on tour, guys. I'm just trying. No, I want to be serious, though. I want to be serious. People are really scared of that word. And you know why they're scared? Because their minds are trained to think of things in binaries. So if you don't have abolition, or if you don't have police, you have anarchy. You have a system where black people, for some strange reason, don't want anyone to call when something goes wrong. That's nonsense. That's not what we're saying. When we're talking about abolition, I'm saying that our brother, Abdurrahman Abdi, whose life was taken from him by a police officer on the streets of Ottawa 4 years ago, he might still be alive if we had called somebody other than the police that day. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say when a black person is in mental health crisis, our society thinks it's normal to send a person with a gun to a mental health crisis or emotional crisis situation, and I don't think that that's normal. And when we start doing that and normalizing that, then we have to normalize the violence that the police do when they get there. And I don't want to do that. So when I say abolition, I'm saying, could you send somebody else? If you did, would it cost less money? Yeah, definitely would. Would you have a better outcome for that individual? You almost certainly would. Could you use the money that you saved not sending somebody who looks like Batman with all these weapons along them? If you sent somebody else, could you divert the rest of that money from that paid thug's salary to go towards housing or detox or trauma counseling? Could you do? Yes, of course you could. The police now, because they have to deal with so many calls of people in emotional and mental distress, they have basically now taken on is to say, yeah, we're like social workers. Except that you're not trained to be a social worker. Except that no social worker carries a Glock. And when we choose not to deploy them and to deploy somebody else, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I mean by abolish them. I mean, stop relying on violence, which is what that is. I talk about a 6-year-old girl who was handcuffed in her school in Mississauga in this book. 6 years old, grade 1. But you know something? The school called the police, and the police came. And the police entered that school, and they did what police do. First of all, I think that's a great example of the fact that the police really had zero job or role in that situation that day, and that we shouldn't have been paying them to go into that school and to do that. But I want to say another thing that I talk about in this book. Those teachers and administrators that decided to call the police, why did they do it? Like, let's answer the question and let's go there. Let's not just like throw our hands up and be like, I can't understand why. It is confounding, but let's go there. Do you know why they called the police? Because if a teacher lays their hand on a 6-year-old child, they won't leave that school with their teacher's license. They'll be suspended and probably fired, and they should be. If an administrator does that, they will probably be suspended and fired. The reason explicitly that they called the police is because the police have the right to use force, and they want someone to use force on a child. That's why they call. And I just feel like, when are we going to stop giving them that option? That's what I'm thinking about when I talk about abolition. And there's a lot of grief that can be avoided and prevented. There's a lot of care that can be replacing these violent interventions that can heal and support our communities. But white people have become so used to calling the police a la Barbecue Betty. You see black people having a good time, you see black people doing what we do, and you feel threatened. And you think that it is your God-given right to bring the guns to us. And I'm just saying, let's not do that anymore. And for those who think that that will make their lives unsafe, I think that they should do some soul searching and ask themselves why they want so many violent interventions for black people. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. You had a question?
My question is, how do we address the complicity of non-black people of color in anti-blackness and oppression of black people?
I'm going to try and repeat that back. How do we address the complicity of non-black people of color in the oppression of black people? Is that your question? All right. I think we have to recognize, so like Barbara, you asked about the police chief's role as a black man in trying to change anything in that institution. I think we have to recognize that if a black person won't do it, very often another non-black person of color will, and that this is how white supremacy maintains its order, is that it tells people who aren't black, you can get one step higher if you step on these folks. And the reason that that works psychologically is that human beings hate being at the bottom. And we will give up almost everything to just feel like we're not worse off. And so when you offer people the opportunity to step over somebody else, even though they will not ever get up here, a lot of people take that. And we have to think about why we're taking it. And if you're not black, so I had my travails with the Toronto Star. They invited me to be a columnist. They described me in their newspaper as activist and journalist Desmond Cole. There was no problem with me being an activist. And then when I did a demonstration that was too effective for their liking, then they said, but you're trying to be an activist and a journalist at the same time. And it was very disingenuous, right? I was told a year before I resigned that I was writing about race too often. And I was told that by the highest person in the company who called me to have lunch with him. That's John Honderick. You got a name and shame, and he's in the book. But after I had to endure that, Desmond, you're writing too much about blackness message for a year quietly and not say anything about it, I left the newspaper after I was disciplined for doing a public demonstration. And the next week, the newspaper hired Shri Paradkar and gave her a title that did not exist before, and it was called Race and Gender Columnist. Wow. When I tell this story, I try to make it clear to people that this is not really about Shri's decision to take that position. Because she has a family, and she's trying to grind out here too. And if you get offered a full-time job as a person of color in the media, you're probably going to take it. But this is how they play us against one another. And Shri writes a lot about blackness now, but she is not black. And she doesn't have the authority to speak to these issues that we do, no matter how much she tries to align herself with our struggle. So it's not that I don't appreciate the work that she's doing, but Shri and all of my colleagues at the Toronto Star who sat quietly while I was constructively fired, they're all unionized. And I wasn't. What is the purpose of organizing in these structures if you're not going to stand up for the most marginalized people in your shop? So like I want to say to the person who asked that question, people who become say like union stewards, but are not black. But they create this like people of color. They love to say people of color. Now, they don't talk about black no more because we're too loud and too obnoxious for them. So now that everything is multiculturalism and people of color thing. If you're not black, you're gonna be more well-positioned than we are to rise up the ranks of these things. Sometimes you're gonna have to say no. Sometimes you're gonna have to say, why didn't you pick this black person over here who's been grinding for twice as long as me? You have to be willing to do that. It is not just talk when we say like all of us or none of us. Uplifting the people who are least likely to get there makes your position stronger too, right? When black people are finally able to take some of these rightful positions that we're supposed to be having because we've worked so hard for them. Because guys, I literally created that position for Shri Paradkar. Like, that's my blood. And I'm not mad that that position exists now, but I am mad that I as a black person can't benefit from my own struggle, but someone else can. So it's really up to non-black people of color to start bringing other people along for the ride, bringing black people along. It's also up to black people who consider themselves to be able-bodied to start bringing along black people who are disabled. It's also up to black people who are cisgender to start saying, maybe I shouldn't say yes to this because there's a lot of other people who are not cis who actually need this position and who don't get this position, and I do. The solidarity and the allyship is within black communities, but it is across, I think, like the spectrum of people of color as well. Black people are fighting so hard and other people are benefiting from that struggle. And I just want other people of color to acknowledge that it doesn't diminish the struggle that you're engaging in. But yo, guys, like we come out for other people when they are in trouble. I see black people doing this all the time, taking risks. And we need you to take risks for us as well.
Yes. There was, yes, please stand.
I want to answer a journalism question.
I'm actually both black and indigenous, so a lot of what we learn in J school is objectivity. And as a black and indigenous person, I was struggling with that in school, and then I actually rejected 2 journalism jobs because they questioned whether I can be fair and unbiased as a black and indigenous person. And so I guess I was just wondering, sort of like how do you balance being black and this objectivity, because obviously all of these institutions that we have to refer to for objectivity directly violences us and kills us.
Yes. So the question, if I can summarize it, is how do I as a black journalist deal with this notion of objectivity and balance it with my responsibilities to myself, I guess, as a black person and other black people, knowing the violence that this system objectivity is doing to black people. Is that fair representation of your question? I thought I was probably going to write a whole manifesto in this book about that exact question. And thank God I have an editor. But let me say now that I reject that notion of objectivity for so many reasons, and my goal with this book is to get it into every single journalism school, into every college and university campus and bookstore in Canada, on campuses, because students need to start thinking about this, because it's not just a fallacy in journalism. It's a fallacy of Western critical thought. Okay? I know people who teach journalism, who tell their students that objectivity is important. I have never heard a person in the Canadian media landscape give a coherent definition of what objectivity means. It's just like God just beams it down from the sky and we all know what it is. If you sit around in a newsroom and you have to decide what story is going to be the lead story of that day? You come to that conclusion objectively, right? No, it's impossible. And what I hate about it so much is that it breeds cowardice. Because you have to choose what you think is most important. And then you have to be accountable for you choosing that. So when people write to your newspaper or your radio station and they say, why didn't you cover this issue? You have to be accountable. And I find that journalists are among the most cowardly people in this country when it comes to being accountable for their choices. So they hide behind this veneer of objectivity so as not to have to answer. Just picking one story to go first over another is an expression of your politics and your values. Choosing that a story won't make the air that day because you don't think you have enough time for it and you have decided it is not as important as the other 5 things that are going to be reported on that day. There's nothing objective about that. All I'm saying to you is when you do that, be prepared to defend your choices. When I come out here and I'm like, blackity, black, 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 like, I can defend that. I have no problem. I know why I am putting that out there first. I know why I say white supremacy instead of discrimination or racism. Do you want to hear about it? Like I have a reason, and I will defend that. And we as journalists are supposed to be trained in how to defend the position that we're taking and not to hide behind this objectivity thing. But journalism school isn't doing that. The person who is the so-called public editor at the Toronto Star, Kathy English, she teaches journalism in my city, in Toronto. Kathy English, yeah, I'm going in. And it's not personal again. I'm so happy to have these debates on the basis of my profession because I have respect for what journalism can mean. Kathy wrote this piece after I left the Star saying that she could understand why the Star was uncomfortable with my public demonstration against carding. Okay? And how you shouldn't become the story when you're a journalist. If you write the story, how do I become your story? You wrote the story. That's what I'm saying. You chose to write about me intervening at that meeting because you thought that it was newsworthy. But then you turn around and say, Desmond ruined it all for us. He became the story. We were all sitting there quietly listening and writing another story about our boring day at the Toronto Police Services Board where nothing happens and nothing changes and nothing moves. And then this black person had to come and ruin everything by trying to become the story. I am the story. That's why y'all hired me for your stupid ass newspaper in the first place. So when I wrote about my experiences with carding in 2015, that was the basis for which they hired me. But then they say you became the story. But my favorite part of this was that there's a white journalist who now works, I think, at the New York Times, Catherine Porter. And Catherine Porter also engaged in activism while she was a columnist. A very trolly kind of white supremacist person who doesn't need to be named in this room tonight got into an argument with Catherine Porter at an environmental event. They had words, they were shouting at each other. She had her daughter with her, and there's this huge exchange. Catherine went back to the Star, and she wrote about her exchange with this white supremacist. I find this interesting because the Toronto Star says that you have to keep an objective line between what you do and what you write. I never tried to write about my demonstration at Police Services Board. I just did it and went home. Catherine Porter wrote about the demonstration that she was participating in. And I can actually see why there might be a problem with that because you're pretty emotionally invested in what you're doing. And somebody might say, well, did you get everything straight? In this case, Catherine Porter didn't get all of her facts straight. And we know that because this white supremacist was filming her and released the video after her column being like, that wasn't true, that wasn't true, that wasn't true. And it was very embarrassing. Now, this is like 2 years before I came on board. But that same Kathy English, who would later tell me I became the story, you know what she wrote? She wrote this long treatise defending Catherine Porter and saying, of course we know she's an activist. Why do you think we hired her? That woman teaches journalism at Ryerson and tells her students about objectivity. And I'm just like, I don't want to hear it. So this comes into every sphere of our lives. Like I said, it's like a Western critical thought problem, not just a journalism problem. And I don't try to balance it out anymore. People are going to call you biased just because you're you. You have to claim the stories that you want to tell, and you have to find venues that will allow you to tell that story. I still write on a blog called Cole's Notes, and I don't feel so bad about it now because I'm a best-selling author, but like... But even if that's not the future for every Black journalist or blogger or writer or poet, we still need your stories. We still need to consume and share and reflect upon the story that you would like to tell us, whether it's mainstream consumption or not. The mass media that is corporate funded, I mean, did Bell Canada really start making telephone lines so that one day they could like liberate Black people through telling stories? No. They're just trying to make a buck. And they've decided that advertising is a good medium for them to make a buck. Ditto Rogers, ditto every media corporation in Canada. They're not in it to tell the truth. They're in it to make money. And so don't judge yourself by your ability to be accepted or approved of by those agencies. Tell your stories and find vehicles and places for them, even if it's just within your own local community.
Thank you, Desmond. Thank you for that question. And for the sake of time, that's going to have to be the last one. Okay.
We have to wrap here. I'm so sorry for everybody. I know people still want to ask questions. And there's also something I want to do with you, which is really important this evening before everybody gets up and buys a book on your way out the door. Okay. It is a shameless plug. Like, it's like, I'm just living it right now. So I want to tell you guys a story because that's what I do. I'm a storyteller. And then I want to ask you to take an action based on the story that I tell you if you feel moved to do so. This is a story from Halifax, which is a place that I write a lot about in my book because there's a proud African Nova Scotian tradition going back more than 240 years in Halifax. A Black African Nova Scotian woman named Santina Rayo was in Walmart about a month ago in Halifax. Santina is in her 20s, and she has two very young children, 3 years old and 15 months old, maybe 16 by now. Santina was shopping at Walmart and bought a whole bunch of different stuff and ended up in the electronics section of Walmart in Halifax to try and pay for everything. The cashier rung through all of her items, but then got to the last three things that she had: a grapefruit, a head of lettuce, and 2 lemons. And the cashier said, look, I can't scan these. I don't have a scale in the electronics section. So let's pay for all the other things that you've bought, and I'm going to send you to another cashier who can weigh these things, and you can pay for them there. Santina did what he said. She paid for all of her other purchases, put everything back into the stroller, and started keeping it moving. On her way to this next cashier, her 3-year-old daughter wanted to stop in the toy section to look at dolls. They did stop. And while they were stopped, they were approached by 5 individuals: 3 Walmart staffers, a security guard, and a Halifax police officer. They accused Santina of concealing items from the store. And she said, well, no, I'm not. So you want to look in my stroller? It's right here. Do you want to look in my purse? Here, it's right here. I'm not concealing anything. The next question the police officer asked her was, show me your identification. How do you steal items that are not outside of the store? How can you even be accused of that? And if you're accusing somebody of stealing, why do you need to see their identification? What's that about? It's about control through the bureaucracy of these practices. You have to stand still and behave yourself while I inspect your personhood. And if you don't stand still while I'm inspecting you, well, I can do further things to you. That's what carding is. Santina realized that she was in a terrible spot and started speaking out and saying that this isn't relevant to what's going on right now. Why are you doing this to me? The police called for backup, and then they eventually attacked Santina. I'm sorry to say, they broke her wrist. They gave her a concussion. She had bruises all over her upper body. Then, in classic fashion, the police charged Santina. They charged her with assaulting the police, bullshit, resisting arrest, and creating a disturbance inside of Walmart. Walmart, who initiated that whole bogus approach in the first place, then banned her from every store in Canada. So now this woman who doesn't have a lot of money, who was literally just trying to shop for herself and her family, cannot go to a place that's accessible to her anymore. We have been trying to fight for Santina, and today she had court for the first time since this happened. The Crown doesn't want to drop the charges because people are paying attention and it will be embarrassing for them. We have managed in 2 weeks to get over 6,000 people to sign a petition for Santina. And on every stop on my tour, I ask people if they would like to sign that petition. Would you like to sign this petition? Please take out your phone. Take out your phone. This will be 30 seconds. When you take out your phone, I want you to type in the following into like a search, a browser search. Type in Santina, Santina, and then type a space, and then type change.org. And when you do that, one of the first results that you should get will say a petition for Santina Rao, R-A-O, for change.org. Can any of you see that? I would like you to sign that petition, which demands 3 things. That the charges against Santina, bogus charges, be dropped. That the real criminals, the police officers who attacked her, be criminally charged. And that Walmart compensate Santina and lift the ban from their stores on her. If you can sign that right now, and if you can use whatever social media platforms that you like to use, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, if you have an email list that you share these kinds of news with people, before you leave tonight, you can sign and share that petition. The Crown is using a whole bunch of dirty tricks to try and delay and defer this so that we stop paying attention. I want to tell you guys, they are going to drop these charges one day. You know why? That cashier that I told you instructed her to pay and then go to the other cashier, it's all on tape. It's all on tape. It's in a freaking Walmart. There's cameras everywhere. So they're going to have to show her being instructed to do exactly what she was told to do and then being approached and told she was stealing. And they don't want that to come to court, but they will try to delay it for as long as possible. So we have to keep the pressure on this Crown and get them to drop the charges, because this woman has to live under criminal penalty now when she didn't do anything wrong. So please sign the petition. Please share the petition. And, justice for Santina Rao and her children.
Thank you, Desmond. Everyone, The Skin We're In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power by Desmond Cole. There's a bunch of books right over there. You can go over. Thank you for coming in tonight.
I'm going to sign every single book that's in the room tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming. It's wonderful seeing you, and thank you, Desmond, for joining us.
I want to say thank you to Barbara for hosting.
You've been listening to Books and Ideas Audio, a presentation of the Vancouver Writers Fest. To hear more events like this one, please visit our website at www.writersfest.bc.ca.